Hello, welcome to Sophie & Co. I'm Sophie Shepard-Natze. As President Obama admits the rise of ISIS was never properly addressed by U.S. intelligence, terrorists threatened to carry out direct attacks on American soil. Is the U.S. ready to respond with more than just airstrikes? Former FBI whistleblower Sibel Edmond is my guest today.
The sweeping wave of the ISIS advance came out of a clear blue sky, with American drones and satellites caught napping. How was it missed by the omnipresent eye of U.S. intelligence? How far will the West now go to combat it? And is the terror onslaught too strong to contain?
Former FBI whistleblower, author Sibel Edmond is my guest today. Sibel, it's really great to have you on our show. So, when asked if the rise of ISIS was a surprise, Obama admitted the intelligence community underestimated ISIS in Syria. Did it not see it coming in Syria or Iraq?
Well, the answer depends on if you want to take President Obama or the U.S. authorities and their words and evaluate based on that. I think the rise of ISIS is mainly about a brand change. Sometimes, as it happens in marketing, we get to see exactly the same principle within the geopolitical games that have been in play for a while now, especially since the end of the Cold War. And the Al-Qaeda brand began wearing off. And that brand now has been changed to ISIS, and as always by design. And considering the fact that we cultivated and put together and financed and created the ISIS, for me, it goes into one of those caricature or the funny statements that are put out by the mainstream media, statements issued by people like Obama or anybody from the State Department.
So what you're saying basically is it was expected for ISIS to turn into something so powerful, into a powerful group, but they're just not admitting to it.
Well, to answer the question briefly, it is ISIS is what is the U.S. media and the propaganda creators from behind the media decide to create. I mean, tomorrow or 3 months from now, we will start hearing another name that we've never heard of, and within a month, they can make that the world's greatest or the most dangerous or threat. And again, that is the main concept here. And I know the mainstream media, U.S. media, the Western media, they have been playing it as such, but they did exactly the same thing with Al-Qaeda. I mean, Al-Qaeda was 100 people or 100,000 people or 10 million people. Another interesting perspective in this is that I refer to the brand change, and sometimes you have to switch the brand for the marketing purposes. And with ISIS, as you can look at and see from the term, from the name now, the brand created, the Western powers have gotten closer to just name and link the entire global terrorism to Islam. And that's another marketing strategy by the United States, NATO, and the main Western countries.
Okay. Well, once again, what we hear from the media is that President Obama blamed the chaos of the Syrian civil war for the rise of ISIS. At the same time, you have the United States doesn't hide that it's been helping the rebels in Syria from the very beginning. Did U.S. intelligence know who they were funding?
Absolutely. As they did in the 80s with the Mujahideens in Afghanistan, as they did with various so-called Islamic terror cells within Caucasus and Central Asia, as they did with Al-Qaeda, and this is no different. As I said, you're only looking at a brand change. You're not looking at any kind of a new phenomenon as far as the U.S. Global perpetual warfare is concerned.
Now, the U.S. is only ramping up support for moderate rebel groups in Syria, or so they say. So who works to determine if rebels are moderate or no? Is there really a way of knowing that?
Again, I mean, it is really difficult to talk to or talk around all these propaganda created by the Western powers through the mainstream media. And I feel like if I start even commenting on that, I'm belittling the facts on the ground. And again, I want to go back and provide the context and say, look, Mujahideens, which later became AKA Al-Qaeda's, they were the freedom fighters. So, and we have had similar situation in the Balkans during the war. You know, you had people that were, or the factions that were considered, you know, fanatics or criminal or terrorists, whether it was KLA, and then they became freedom fighters, they became our allies. And again, you're looking exactly at the same thing, different brand, but you're looking exactly at the same phenomenon. And we can talk around this and bring in all the different characterization put forth by the Western media, and then we can put it and compare it, what has been happening in the past 30, 35 years, and we'll see that the marketing strategy is the same, it's just a brand difference here.
Okay. What we're seeing right now is that U.S.-led airstrikes in Syria aren't stopping ISIS, well, at least not yet, and the Kurdish fighters on the ground are asking for ground support. Will the U.S. be sending troops to fight ISIS on the ground? What do you think?
Again, that's going to depend on various factors on what's going to happen. And again, I'm going to go back to context and history. The Kurdish factions and the Kurdish factor has always been used and played. The Kurdish faction and the Kurdish factor was the case when we had the war with Iraq. You know, we had the northern territory and the Kurdish area. Then we always get to, okay, what's going to be Turkey's role? Are they going to be wary of what's going to happen afterwards? If this happens with us and the Kurds, and again, you're looking at the same replicate of what we had in place, what was taking place during the initial stage of war against Iraq.
Mm-hmm. Because right now, the U.S. military actions in Iraq have one set of objectives, and then in Syria another. For example, Kurds in Iraq receive so much aid so quickly from the United States, unlike the Kurds in Syria. What is it, like two kind of brands of Kurds, like you say? Is it wise to assume two different strategies when fighting one enemy?
Absolutely. You have the Kurds in Iran, and you're looking at a totally different characteristics and where they stand within the. I mean, you're looking at there are over 25, 30 million Kurds, okay? And the Kurds in Syria, you have the Kurds in Turkey, you have the Kurds in Iraq, you have the Kurds in Iran. And right now, the game and the play being centered around the stage in Syria. And so we are looking at a different mechanism there than when you're looking at what's happening with the northern Iraq. And also you have to look at the oil factor. Okay, what do we have in Syria where the Kurds are concentrated versus what we have in northern Iraq, such as in such places such as Kirkuk, and well, do we have the oil factor in play there or we don't have it there? So if you start putting those kinds of information that comes with each region and the different sects versus, let's say in this case, Kurds, and you're looking at several different factors in play. You're not looking at only one. So you're not looking at Kurdish faction and here are the Kurds and trying to basically put them all in the same bucket. It all depends on the geostrategic facts and what you're facing, what we have, what is in play, what is at stake. And then again, you can never compare northern Iraq with what's happening with Syria and the Kurdish region in Syria.
Yeah, because I was thinking maybe they're not helping the Kurds in Syria because they're affiliated with the Kurds in Turkey, and America maybe doesn't want to upset Turkey being one of its greatest allies, no?
No, not really, because you had exactly the same scenario with the Kurds in northern Iraq and the Kurds inside Turkey. And if you look at the border region and the cross-border activities between the Kurds in Iraq and in Kurds in Turkey, we had exactly the same situation. And this was one of the main reasons that Turkey did not want to allow United States using its air base during the early stage of the war against Iraq. It was about the Kurds in northern Iraq and how that would upset the equilibrium that the Turkish government wants to preserve and keep in place as far as the Kurdish faction is concerned.
All right, I got you. Now, the former CIA chief and ex-defense secretary Leon Panetta said the U.S. is looking at least 30-year war against ISIS, which is not at all what the White House is telling the public. Is he exaggerating? What's your estimate?
Well, I would say it's a very short period. I'm really surprised because we just talked about the brand change. The war against al-Qaeda was declared as a forever war, and it has been expanding. I mean, the war against al-Qaeda started with, it was supposed to be in Afghanistan, and we started chasing al-Qaeda in Yemen and Pakistan with all the drone attacks, al-Qaeda in Iraq, and the fact that this was going to be a forever war. And now that the brand has changed to ISIS, I'm very surprised that the former CIA director is stamping it with such a short time period. I believe 30-year period is very short, unless they have already in plan other sects or the other factions that they are going to declare the world's most dangerous terrorists. I would say it's a very short period of time. We currently are more interested in an ongoing, never-ending perpetual war. So I would say if you compare it with what we have been characterizing, or our government and the media, al-Qaeda, I would say I'm surprised that he has put such a short time stamp on ISIS, considering the attraction or the attractiveness of the brand, because it has the word Islam built into it. And let's just forget al-Qaeda. I mean, al-Qaeda was just the noun, the name. And in this case, you're looking at a far reaching implications when you declare the current greatest threat with an organization that has the word Islam built into it. And I think it's much more attractive to be used. So I would say, yeah, it should be forever. I'm surprised it's 30 years.
All right, Sibel, hold your thought there. We're going to take a short break right now, and when we're back, we'll continue talking to FBI whistleblower Sibel Edmond about how powerful U.S. surveillance is when it comes to facing ISIS. Stay with us.
Welcome to Neve Tzuf, the most beautiful yeshiva in Israel. It's heaven. It's a good place to live.
They took my land. They killed my brothers.
People from the village throwing stone, and the army is waiting down. Every Friday, it's the same ritual.
Until they give our land back, we will keep throwing rocks.
We don't want to live like that, this way every Friday.
We don't, and I hope that they don't.
We will continue the resistance forever.
У меня брат не хотел заниматься дрессурой. Я говорю, Аскольд, нам зритель никогда не простит, что мы запашные и не продолжили дело своего отца. Первый выход наш на манеж. Мы его воспитаем, он увидит, что здесь не страшно, мы ему покажем, что здесь его друзья находятся. Чего вдруг? Хорош тебе, хорош.
Животное должно для себя определить вот эти правила игры. Укусить человека или напасть на него – это нельзя делать.
Ай, больно мне, кто меня укусил? Получил по носу один раз, да? Вот это его дети и мой ребенок.
Вот эти ограничения нужно для него поставить с детства, тогда не придется физически на него воздействовать в будущем.
We are not talking the language of war, but I will only react to situations.
I have read the reports, but I'm not in a position to...
No, I will leave that to the State Department to comment on your latter point.
I don't want to say that...
Mr. Kerry, do you have any comments on the document?
No.
No comment? Thank you.
No more weasel words. When you evade a direct question, be prepared for a chase. When you throw a punch, be ready for a battle.
Freedom of speech means little without the freedom to question.
We're back with FBI whistleblower and author Sibel Edmond. Welcome back to the show. Great to have you with us once again. Now, U.S. Vice President Joe Biden blamed Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Turkey for helping extremists in Syria, but then he later apologized for his comments. But was he right?
Okay, so rather than dignify people like Biden, let's talk about, again, context and history. And I'm going to be repeating that, and I'm sorry if the viewers are going to say, how many times is she going to say context and history? Well, we actually, my website, our news organization was the first one to really break within the United States the training of the Syrian rebels in Turkey. And this was about 6 to 9 months before anything about Syria actually made it into the news. And using U.S. air base, and this is in southern Turkey, close to the border with the Syria. And this was NATO and the United States factions training and arming and sending them back, having them cross the border, rebels, long before actually it became news, Syria. And again, as I said, this was done in Turkey by the NATO's forces, mainly U.S. and British forces. And it was something that was planned and designed and implemented by the United States. So for Joe Biden to come and right now, putting this out, of course, he will get away with it because the mainstream media here, they're not going to go and revisit the facts that were exposed with the activities of U.S., what they did in Turkey, training these factions. I mean, now it's called ISIS. It's like French fries or the freedom fries. You're looking exactly the same fries at the same price. So that's all I'm going to say. It is just ludicrous. And then he took it back because it upset the current president in Turkey, Erdogan. And I wouldn't even find it really newsworthy, but it's funny.
Funny is the right word. Yeah, funny is the right word.
It is funny.
Why is it more important for Sunni countries like Qatar or Turkey to bring down President Assad than to contain extremism? Because you have Saudis and Qataris helping the anti-Assad rebels and the Turks asking Kurds to turn against Assad before they get any help with ISIS. Why?
In reality, if you're looking at the factual, objective analysis of it, really, it's not to their advantage whatsoever. I mean, you just name the countries. For example, Turkey is a member of NATO, and Turkey is greatly managed and directed by the United States, has been for several decades. There's no question about that. And when you're looking at United Emirates and the countries within the region, including Saudi Arabia, you're looking at the tentacles of the United States. I call them the tentacle nations. So if you start looking at saying, what is their advantage? Of course, there are no advantages, and you only look at disadvantages. If you start polling people within these countries, and I can speak to Turkey, for example, if you start getting the opinion polls in Turkey, you will see that over 90% of people in Turkey are against such moves. And Turkey had a pretty good relationship with Assad and with Syria. They engage in some really good level of commerce. And there has been zero advantage. they have to implement policies created, designed, and issued by the United States, by NATO, and that's what they are doing. So to answer your question, it has never been a question of any other nations, especially in the region, their interests or their advantages or even comparative advantages. It has always been about what is designed, what is put in place, what orders are issued here in the United States, and that's the end of it. And the other people's interest, the other nations' interest, is not even in the equation. It's never been. And if you ask the populace, people in those nations, they would actually nod and they would say, yes, that's exactly what they believe, because that's the reality.
All right, here's another possible and interesting turn of events. FBI Chief Mike Comey warned terrorists are working on an effort to attack the United States very, very soon. Is the U.S. ready to respond?
Okay, well, again, we have to look at different things and say why this statement was made. Is it based on some sort of facts and real solid intelligence gathered? Or is it the fact that, for example, we have had for the TSA and for the flights, the threat level has been really low. And when that goes for a long time, people, they get antsy. They say, well, this is really annoying to have all these screens out there and going through them. We haven't had any terrorist threats, really. The level has not been blinking red or even orange, it's been yellow. Let's go through the rainbow colors. So it's time to re-energize the Americans with the fear of terrorism. We need to have more expenditure for things to put in place, because we can go ahead and increase the threat level within the airports. Let me give you an example. If you look at the stock market and look at the stock prices for all the military industrial complex related companies and firms, you will see how they have just gone up tremendously since the brand from Al-Qaeda switched to ISIS. And this is, again, the brand change I'm referring to. This is when you say, yes, now we can go ahead and produce and sell more to the government and spend billions more. So the same thing is true for the internal security, fear-mongering factors on the ground in the United States. It's time to re-energize that fear, and that's exactly what they are doing. And what's going to follow this is going to be more measures put in place, whether it's within the airports, or whether it's the hiring within the FBI or increasing the number of informants. Those are the things that are going to follow this announcement. We have to have more expenditure because of the public consent, because the fear level is going to go up, and therefore those expenditures are going to be justified. And it's as simple as that.
Mm-hmm. And the FBI also says that dozens of Americans are believed to be fighting in Syria with rebel groups. How did that happen?
Well, it has to happen. Even if it's not the case, it has to happen, because you're looking at how ordinary Americans perceive these things. Well, think about it. Syria and this area, that region in Iraq, they are thousands of miles away. What can they do to us from there? So it's not enough to raise the terror threat and really do some heavy duty fear mongering. But if you bring some U.S. elements and ties in there, if we have Americans who are there, who are going to come back here and they're going to start, be our boogeyman here on the ground, and they're going to blow up buildings, that's going to be marketing-wise more attractive. So it's going to be easier to sell to the American public the notion of our war against ISIS. We're not going to hear much of Al-Qaeda for a while. So Al-Qaeda is going to disappear and exit the stage, replaced by ISIS. So yes, that's another marketing strategy. If we start looking at some of these, what's happening, what has been happening, and what is being put forth by these people, including the former CIA director and the US media, and if you start looking at it from the marketing perspective, we get to find more answers and understand what's going on, rather than trying to approach this through some logical, political, philosophical, or even sociological analysis. And I think the best model that fits what's happening right now and explains it is the marketing model, and we should look at it as such.
Twitter is suing the FBI because it is not allowed to tell the public when the government asks for surveillance help. Why is surveilling Twitter such a big deal for U.S. government? Does so much really depend on Twitter and other social media?
Well, why surveilling all the Americans through NSA with their phone, every single phone conversation is such an important thing for the government. And again, I'm gonna take us back and say, what kind of reaction from the public does this create? I mean, when we hear every day of how much is being gathered from the Facebook, it's true, and what's being gathered and collected and how people are being monitored through their Twitters, combined with what we have already known since 2000, 2004, 2005, the expose on NSA, you have a better chance of controlling the majority, controlling the people.
Sibel, can the FBI, CIA, NSA control their information, prevent it from gaining public attention? Like, what can prevent people like you, for instance, or Ed Snowden from speaking out?
Nothing. Nothing prevents people from speaking out. I have been speaking out. I don't think the U.S. government is really bothered. If the United States government is really bothered by people who are speaking out, people like myself or some credible, real whistleblowers, and if that becomes a real threat, it's very easy for them to take out those people, to eliminate them. And but they are not, because it hasn't risen to that level yet. If the reach were such, and if the consequences of people speaking out really reach the real masses and brought out, some reaction, then you would be looking at a totally different scenario, or the reaction or action by the U.S. government. But we haven't seen it yet.
Sibel, thank you so much for this wonderful insight and for your take on things that are going on around us right now. We're talking to Sibel Edmond, FBI whistleblower. We're talking about how the United States government is handling the situation around ISIS and whether it's working or not. Thanks a lot for your thoughts. That's it for this edition of Sophie & Co., and we'll see you next time.